Alrighty, today we are back with another AI Tool Report live podcast. I am stoked about this one. Today's guest is Grant Hushek. He is recently married. He was the first employee over at Hampton Members Club, and he's now the owner of Grantbot Process and Consulting. Welcome to the podcast, Grant.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I'm very excited, and I think it's going to be just even talking to you before this, I can tell this is going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah, I mean that's the hope with it as well. I think when we were developing this podcast and we were kind of fleshing out the idea of like why we should run one, we had a look at all the other AI podcasts out there, and a lot of them are so deeply technical, which is good for people that are deeply involved in the industry.
Yeah,
But for me, like if we're running a podcast, I want it to be something that I enjoy doing, and I want to learn about the person behind the AI. So that's usually how we try and lead the conversations.
absolutely,
Um,
man.
on that note, let's talk about you, and let's lead things all the way back to the beginning of your journey in the workforce as an entrepreneur. As I always do with guests, I do a deep dive into their background, where they kind of started. And yours is a bit of an interesting one. I can see that your first job was as a furnace operator. What does that involve? Tell me about that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a fourth generation materials engineer, going back to my great grandfather who was a blacksmith, I think, before he emigrated to the United States. So that's the oldest form of metallurgy. And so, long story short, the family business is a metals processing plant in Arizona. And I was of the fourth generation, along with my brother, that worked in the plant in high school. My brother now runs the show there, but I was a furnace operator after working in shipping and receiving, and that pretty much just means taking huge baskets of metal and sticking it into an oven that you could crawl inside. Like it's huge. Some of them are the size of like a living room, well, maybe a New York living room, and some of them are, the size of a fridge. And you just stick the metal in, you heat it up to 400, 500 degrees C for 6 hours, cool it down a specific way, and the metal comes out and it has different properties. It's harder, it's more elastic. It can do new things for different applications. And so I worked there for multiple summers and months during high school, loading metal, unpacking metal, shipping metal. That was my first job.
So interesting. It's so new to the conversations I've had so far. Like everyone's in door to door sales. I was in phone sales. Like most people are around that sort of thing. So being in that and being in what you are now, like what kind of convinced you to transition out of what is a family industry, what is like a guaranteed job, a guaranteed transition to some sort of wealth, some sort of position of authority? Why did you decide to differentiate your trajectory from your family?
Yeah, I mean, I studied materials engineering, so I was on that track, and I always joke with people like my grandma, even though my brother was like on his way to taking over the general manager role, my grandma would always be like, "So when are you gonna take over the plant?" I'm like, "That's just not in the cards for me, Grandma. I'm sorry." But I knew that I was more destined for tech and the kind of space that I'm in with startups now. When I went to Montreal for my first internship, I was working with like a 13-person team in Montreal, working on an advanced material called graphene. I'll save you the nerdy details, but this specific material was perfect for the speaker cone of headphones, like the ones that I'm wearing now, where it kind of moves back and forth because it's incredibly rigid. And so to make really crisp sound, you need to have this material stay in its shape at high frequencies. Anyway, I begged them for 2 years to go work for them. I went. It was awesome. And I found out, spending all my free time with the founder, that this is what I wanted to be doing. Like, they were talking to Dell. This is a 13-person company, talking to Dell, talking to Apple, talking to Microsoft, all these companies that have little speaker applications in their product suite. And I was like, we're in a tiny office in the middle of Montreal. No one knows about us, yet somehow you're talking to all of these manufacturers of like name brand products. This is incredible. And that's when the switch in my head clicked. Like, I'm not going to be an engineer for the rest of my life. I definitely want to be on the business strategy and quotes side of things, because that was much more interesting, much more fun. And it really tickled my brain the way that I know that's would make me happy to work on.
Although that's kind of where you found like that kind of passion for the entrepreneurship and like pursuing those sorts of people, what was maybe something that you took from those like furnace operator days into that?
I think the biggest one was looking back, right? When you're 15, 16 years old loading metal, it's hard to have perspective. But I think that looking back on it, the two takeaways were that my dad was always really busy growing up because he was running this business. And, I can appreciate all the hours that he put in now running my own business. I know how stressful that can be. So definitely an appreciation from the owner operator role. But I think the training, or maybe it's the accountability of like, I was never around my dad while he at work, right? He had other fish to fry, and I was just kind of one of the team members. And there was clearly process and structure and all those things. And so I was thrown into it, trained up in a few days, and then we just all had the same kind of common language around that. And I did that experience in, I don't know what it is in Celsius, call it 45-degree heat around furnaces in the Arizona summer. It's bonding, it's a lot of structure, and it's a lot of precision, because you don't want, like, these pieces are going on airplanes, they're going in artillery, like they're important parts of metal. So there's a seriousness around it, just like when you have a seriousness around any customer work. So lots of like micro lessons that connect when I look back on it, but in the moment, like, so hard to have that perspective when you're just dripping sweat, like shoving a basket of metal into an oven. It's a different type of mindset.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I've done hot yoga. I do it quite regularly. So I can't imagine trying to shove hot pieces of metal on top of those poses. I can imagine how intense and stressful. And if anything, it teaches you like work ethic and the ability to
Yeah,
kind of struggle through those things.
totally.
Something I'm getting the sense of immediately is that you quite like the pressure of responsibility. You are working in this place when you're 15, 16, you're producing these pieces of metal that have to be perfect, that have to work as part of airplanes or large manufacturing facilities. You also then talk about your job and what you're doing just now. You're owning your own company. You're the first founder at Hampton. Like, what is it about your personality that makes you either so comfortable or so attracted towards that responsibility?
Well, I think that you touched on this a little bit at the beginning, of like kind of what's the why behind it all. I really care about having the family situation that I really wanted as a kid. Like, everyone's around. My dad was super busy for the right, like running his business, and so I didn't get to spend as much time with him. So I really, since then, that was one of the bigger takeaways, is like, I want to be around my kids as much as I can with my business and while it's growing and everything. And so the responsibility really comes from like, I own the path to that outcome, right? No one else is going to help me get there. And so from high school sports and group projects and any situation where I could help steer or lead a group or a team, kind of just fell into a natural position for me. So I think that it really stems from that realization as a kid of, I want to be around for my family in the future. And then as I got older, really seeing how my career and my work could translate into that goal. And that's how I got to Europe. That's how I got to stay with my wife now. And that's how we get to travel and all those different things. So, yeah, I think it's just knowing that the outcome that I want is mine for the taking if I can bend the world to that shape. And that's kind of just been the path since I realized, especially when I met my wife, that this is going to be what I want.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting just touching on this. Like, it's very top of mind for me right now. I was listening to a podcast this morning with Darren Lee, and he talks about how everything in your life that you can have a direct action on is like your responsibility, right? You're responsible for your own future. What happens in your life is a direct result of your outcomes. And ignoring that means that you won't kind of get to go anywhere that you ever want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So being comfortable with that responsibility is super important. And you've obviously taken that and kind of leveraged that into the positions that you were in. And like one of those positions that I really want to touch on is your time at Hampton specifically. So I want to hear the genesis story. How did you get in touch with the Hampton founders? How did that come to be? How were you the first employee and what was that interview process like?
Yeah, it's a fun story. I like telling it. So Sam Parr, one of the founders, has the podcast. I was listening to the podcast, so I followed him on Twitter. He tweeted out, if you're a founder looking for community, fill out this Google form. At the time, I was working on a different startup idea. It was my last year. No, it was my only year in my master's. And I like, well, fill it out. And it was actually the application form to join Hampton. So I got an interview slot to join as a member. And I got on the phone with Joe Spicer, Sam's partner, and he's asking me the questions. And he's like, "Hey, it's going to be $3,000 a year for the membership. Does that work for you?" And I was like, "No, I'm a student. Like, I've got no money. Can I work? Can I wash dishes for my dinner type of thing? Can I work it off?" And he's like, "What? No." And I was like, "Right, okay." So I get denied. They let me down easy. But I followed up and I said, seriously, if you ever need any help, let me know. He said, okay, email me next month. And so for 3 months, on the first of the month, I emailed him and I said, hey, is there anything you need? Hey, is there anything you need? And on the third month, he said, yeah, do you know anything about Zapier? And I said, no, but I've always wanted to learn. He said, great. If you can do these 5 things, then let's keep talking. And so he gave me the keys to the castle. I get in there, build the first 5 automations, going through forums, documentation, everything. And they worked, and I got another 5 and another 5, and it kind of went on like that for the first month. And then around the end of the first month, I had a call with Sam as like my formal interview. And I remember I had my laptop on a stand just like I do now, and I had a little like camping lantern because I didn't have good lighting in my apartment. So I was like, oh, I'll just put the camping lantern behind my laptop. And he gets on the phone and he goes, dude, it looks like you're in a hostage video. Like, where are you right now? And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I am as low budget as it gets. And the interview went well enough, and we got along well. And so he's like, all right, I think this will be a good fit. So I got the job offer a couple days later or a week later, and then 2 people joined right after me. So we were the first 3 on a team of 5, two co-founders and 3 employees for the first like 5 months.
Wow. I mean, it's a real testament to just like scrappiness when you're just starting out, right?
Yeah.
It's the same with like AI Tool Report. When I first found Martin Arturo, I found them via a Twitter comment. Martin had left a post. I
Mm-hmm.
dropped him a DM on Twitter after we hopped on a call, and that's how like AI Tool. That's how I became part of AI Tool Report, and we continued to grow.
Wow.
And it's interesting because I don't know about yourself, but I've got lots of friends that have went through the traditional job application process, right? They finish university, they go through 4 rounds of interviews, they join JP Morgan, they get a job with a ceiling that won't move for the next 3 years. There's not much room for innovation. But on the same topic that we touched on earlier, like if you take that responsibility for your own life, if you're proactive and if you look for these opportunities, like amazing things like this can come into play.
Yeah, man. And it's just being consistent and persistent with the things you want. It's like the reason I was so annoying to Joe is because I needed to stay in Europe to be with my wife. Like that was my only focus. I need to get a job that allows me to stay in Europe, and they would let me work remotely in my head. And that's why I was just like, you guys are hiring. You clearly don't have a lot of structure yet. You've given me a shot, so maybe you'll be okay with an American living in Europe. And they were. And to put it even further, like I'm quote mentoring this kid who was a few years younger than me in high school. Now he just finished up a year abroad teaching English, and he's looking for a job. And I'm like, hey man, what do you want to do? He's like, design. Great, pick 5 brands and make some Facebook ads. Like you're not going to get paid for it, but that application will not only make you a better designer, but it'll show them like you really care about the brand. And if these are brands you really like, and he's telling you about this chocolate bar, he's like, I love this chocolate bar. This is amazing. I go, great. Go make 4 ads for them and send them to like find an email and send it. I guarantee you will get a better response on one of those 5 applications than a cold CV in a Dropbox. Like, what are we doing? You're one of 1,000 versus one of one. And it's the side door, the back door that everyone always talks about, but they exist. You just got to try a little bit harder, a little bit more unique, but man, it paid dividends for me and you too. You took the back door on finding a co-founder. It worked out.
Yeah, I mean, I give that piece of advice to everyone. Bringing things back into Hampton, you mentioned they've got Sam, you've got his co-founder at that point, you're the first employee, you have 2 more. during those early days of Hampton, what was the internal team culture like? Like, was it process oriented? Was it fucking madness? Like, did you have live sessions where you're all like, I don't know, chanting to some god? Like, what was going on?
Oh God, it was something. It was a lot of fun. It was chaos. There was no structure. It was just let's get the next thing out. And I remember, I remember so well. Sam had asked me to make a HubSpot email, like design one, and I barely knew automation, and he asked me to design an email, and I'm like, this is just not my thing. And so I make just the worst draft you could imagine. And I sent it to him. I go, it has the copy on it. Is this what you want? And this is like my first real job, right? So I'm like, it does the thing you said. And he goes, this is shit work. You're slowing us both down. Be better. And I'm like, okay, you're right, but I don't know what I'm doing. So can I get just a little bit of feedback, right? And we got along. The team was really tight. It was a lot of fun, like building things on the fly. And my favorite memory from those early days was the launch day. It was like March 28th, 2023. I remember it fairly well because we all got Sam had just recorded a podcast for My First Million announcing Hampton. He had been kind of hinting about it. And we got on to a Zoom call for about 6 hours as a team and watched literally as the sun rose over the United States, the Google Analytics traffic to the website covered the US as people listened to the podcast on their way to work, as they started their day, like literally like the map literally just covered in dots all the way around the US. It was surreal. And it was even more surreal because all of the infrastructure was not prepared for that. Like Sam had tried to quell everyone's expectations. Hey, we don't know how this is going to go. We'll see. It went great. And the infrastructure was not prepared for that. So like we had a wait list with 500 slots on it and we had 3,000 applications. So I'm like furiously building new automations while I'm watching the list like fill up. I'm like, oh shit, here it comes, here it comes. And I press like this flip over to the new system while people are applying. 10 people email us, hey, what the hell happened? It's like it was just chaos that day. And it was very, very fun dealing with that chaos with the whole team. So that's probably my favorite memory from my entire time at Hampton.
With that, like, what was your kind of takeaways from that experience? Because that's very much how we've operated, and like in the fastest, like iterate rapidly, throw shit at the wall, see what sticks. Like, did that have longevity in that approach? Did you become more systemized as time came on?
Yeah, we definitely brought in more more system thinking, more scale. Towards the end of that year, 2023, yeah, last year, we hired a head of product, and he came in and taught me a lot about systems thinking and testing procedures and things like that. And also, we kind of started to reconfigure some of the work that I had done in the first round, just getting the stuff working. We then made it more scalable. So it was a lesson that didn't really get applied until this other person with a lot more experience came into the picture. But from a team perspective, I think that we all kind of knew that there was going to be some intense months ahead in a different way than they had been before. Like we were doing a lot of prospecting. Now is like a lot more delivery of the goods and of the service that we were promising. So um, I think the bigger lesson from that is like meta wise, better to prepare for a best case scenario. Like you can do the first 5 minute iteration, but if there's potential for big outcomes, you should have infrastructure ready for that. So I think that that's something that can really take an extra 10 minutes when you're building something out. It's like the question we always try to ask is what's the 100x scenario here. Like we might build this for you to put out 10 pieces of content per week. What if you need to put out 1,000, right, across 15 platforms? Okay, well, what's the automation going to do, and what's the process going to look for Liam when he's actually interacting with that? So if there's a people process or a business process or perspective that doesn't jive with the automations we built, then we need to reconfigure. And so that was a big takeaway to the agency of how do we think about the 100x scenario, not just the standard model.
It's sort of like delayed gratification in a business manner, right? Is like you're putting more work up front, for better outcomes in the end. Like it has parallels with that. Is that something that you had to train yourself to like change your way of thinking about things, or does that kind of come naturally when that kind of new product manager came in? Did he teach you specifically to kind of change your mindset to think about things in this way?
I would say I've always had great long-term patience and terrible short-term patience. I did 2 years of long distance Los Angeles to Rome relationship with my wife, so I'm pretty good at waiting. Because that sucked, but we made it. And from the automation perspective, the best thing that can happen is that you build something awesome and never hear from the client again because there's no errors, right? In a perfect world, they're like, we're growing so much, we need to like we're changing our sales process to accomplish more throughput. Okay, great. Then we should change your automations. But like the best case scenario is you press publish and no one ever says, "Oh, there's an error message here. Oh, edge case detected, whatever." We want to have all that stuff kind of wrapped up when we press publish the first time. So when that happens, the silence is the win, right? And that is a hard adjustment to get used to. But that's also why we track quantitative like minutes saved and dollars saved too. So there are ways to keep scoreboards.
I mean, in terms of your role, you start out with this few automations. You're kind of starting out in this like more random tasks, but I can see from your history you moved into different roles over time. What were the discussions like that moved you into those roles, and like what did you kind of end up doing over your time at Ham?
It started out just with like of the moment, can we automate this? Can we automate that? And that's when I was really learning how to use those tools. But then it started to get a little bit more strategic about, well, what do we want the invite sequence to really feel like from a whole experience, both customer facing and back end? Like, do we want the membership coordinator, salesperson involved in the process? Do we want it fully automated? What is the pros and cons of that? So those discussions started to take place a little bit more as time went on and as the company matured. Um, when when the head of product started to come in, that's when we really zoomed out and we were thinking, okay, well, what does like year 5 renewal look like? And if that is what year 5 looks like, how can we get that to look like year 2? And year 2 is in a couple months, right? So that's when we started to have those conversations around the much bigger business oriented or KPI focused automations and making the whole system, Airtable and HubSpot, start to speak to each other end to end. That was a pretty different way of thinking about the system. And so that was kind of my last 6 months at the job.
And what made you kind of finally transition out of Hampton?
I got to 2024 and I had a handful of clients and I felt like I was working 2 full-time jobs and I was like, I can't keep this up. I'm really tired. I started having panic attacks and I was like, this is not gonna stick. So, um, that all being said, yeah, 1 second, sorry.
I can cut this out. It's no problem.
Okay, cool. Alessa, you can go through. You can go through. Go ahead. All
I'll
right.
cut it out in post. It's fine.
It's all right. Whoever's at the door can wait. So when we were going through, where was I? Sorry.
You were at the
The
point where
transition.
you were having your transition panic
Yeah.
attacks.
So yeah, got to 2024, had a handful of clients working 2 full-time jobs. At least that's what it felt like. And I started having panic attacks, and I was like, the candle is burning at both ends. This is not sustainable. And so I did some mental math, and I said, can I make it to my 2-year anniversary in September? No, I can't. Can I make it to the team retreat in June? Yes. But do I want to drop out right after a team retreat in person? No, that'll feel pretty shitty. So I decided that this is over, January, February. By March, I was like, yeah, I got to pull the plug. So I gave him a month and a half notice and thought that was enough to really transition me out of the role into the new team that was forming. And by April, I had moved on to Grantbot.
And how was that like transition handled internally? Like, did you have conversations with the owners? Was that handled with grace? What did that kind of look like?
Yeah, it was really emotional for me. I don't know if it was the same for everyone because it was my first job and they had given me the ability to live in Europe, really treated me really well. So I really have a lot of respect for the company and the team and the founders, especially. I had a meeting with my manager, head of product, told him about the situation and that I was planning on leaving in a couple of weeks. And then I had already drafted up two emails, one for the founders and one for the CEO and head of product. And so I kind of sent those out, and then they reached out, and everyone was, happy to see me go. And I knew kind of going into it that the founders would back me because Sam had written in my offer letter, I think this job is going to change your life. And that most people that work for us, not most people, but a handful of people that have worked for us have gone on to create venture-backed companies or work at A16Z, or really like their careers are really take off when they work for me. And he wasn't saying it in an arrogant way. It was more, I think, more like a recruiting mechanism. But the facts don't lie. Like he's had a great track record of talent coming into his companies and then going and doing some pretty incredible things. So I hope to be counted among those people in the future. So I knew that they would support me kind of starting my own business after Hampton.
What was it you think about either the company or like his approach that like empowered you and gave you the own skills to start your own thing? Like, to give you context, for me, before I kind of started with Martin, I'd had a lot of my own companies. I was over in Australia at the point. I was working a bunch of odd jobs. I'd done like specialty coffee roasting, which is a passion of mine, worked for
Sweet.
other people, stuff like that, tried to do marketing. But in all of those companies beforehand, I'd never been given the confidence and trust and responsibility to actually go out and achieve something. And it's
Mm-hmm.
only through working with Martin and like that innate trust that he's built into me, and he's given me authority, and he's given me a pathway to go and achieve that. And he's been like, it's very much based on like a performance metric. And that's empowered me and gave me a lot of confidence to kind of go and do my own thing and like help build the company from there. Like, is it the same for you with the company over there at Hampton, or is there any other kind of aspects that maybe I'm not touching on?
No, I mean, I think it was pretty sink or swim as far as getting the job done at the beginning. Like, if those automations didn't get built, I don't think they would have kept me around, And as more things got built, they kept on giving me more work, and it was chaotic, like I said, but it was a great kind of place to sharpen skills and work with the team, especially remotely. I had already tried two different startup ideas by the time Grantbot came around, and I had realized the first one was a sports betting hedge fund, of which I don't know how to code, write algorithms, or statistics, and so I was relying on other people to do that, and I was going to do everything else. That failed, and then I tried to do a writing tool for real estate agents, where it was still kind of no code, so closer to what I do, but it wasn't in my tech stack, so we had someone else building it. And again, it was like, I'm not controlling the product or service. If I can't do that, then I can't really improve it, and that makes me feel like I'm not impacting quality enough. I'm not making sure that customers are satisfied, because service is really important to me. And so then when I came to a service-based business and an agency, I learned what an agency was by working in Hampton. So when I kind of saw that there was a way to go past freelancer mode into business mode and scale, that's when I was like, great, I think this is what I can do and do it well. So getting that knowledge from the Hampton member group and having skills that I know had been battle tested, I felt good enough to make the jump. I already had one person working for me, and we just kind of continue to build out our client roster.
Let's talk about that jump, and let's talk about what you currently do. And I want to
Mm-hmm.
start off with a quote from your company LinkedIn page. So at the end of your LinkedIn company page, it says, "Curious what the new definition of labor means for your business? Question mark." Just a simple question at the end. What are you defining as a new version of labor, and how does your company help achieve this?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite questions. So I think that the new definition of labor is that we're using automation, AI, and global talent in a completely new way relative to 2, 5, 10 years ago. And so that the way that we produce goods and services can completely change. Domestic talent typically is hired for really critical thinking, innovation, these types of skills that we expect, at least in the US, that's what you would think of a knowledge worker. And with automation and AI, you can lay down these kind of train tracks that for processes that run over and over and over again, so that your high skilled knowledge working talent doesn't have to do these $10 an hour tasks anymore. And if there's some nuance and there's some complexity, then you can look at a global talent person that has one very narrowly defined scope, or you can be someone like me who gives a lot of trust and faith in their global talent to do much more complex roles, because I'm a very firm believer in, opportunity is not equally distributed, but talent definitely is. So there's some phenomenal talent all over the world that I would love to have on my team for automation engineering work, but I digress. Answering your question, how does that help businesses? Well, to reduce your costs and really get the most out of the teams that you've spent a lot of time hiring, we believe that the best ROI from automation, AI, and global talent comes from removing that context switching and that distraction so that your high skilled, highly invested talent can do high leverage work. And so when we get all of the domestic team focused on high leverage tasks, things that they enjoy, things that makes them curious, excited to go to work every day, chances are your product gets better and your profitability gets better because you're reducing costs where someone who's making, call it $40 an hour, is not doing something that someone who can be paid $10 or $15 an hour can do at the same quality. So we help discover automation potential in businesses. We implement automations and AI automations inside of businesses. And if you're on the lookout for a new executive assistant or some sort of global hire, I am tracking 30, 35 different global staffing firms right now for all different types of things. I just have my own little personal directory. So if someone comes to me and says, I'm really looking for a chief of staff, then I'll go through my list and see who does that, what time zone do you want them to be in. I'm just do those recommendations to be helpful, right? I don't have any referral agreements with any of these people. It's just helpful for me to know from my own business. If I want to recruit someone from South Africa, I know exactly where to go. And if you want someone in that time zone, we've got options. So I'm just there to kind of be helpful on the global talent side. Maybe we spin up some stuff for automation engineers in the future, but really just focused on building automations for people that solve problems in a scalable way.
Okay, let's be creative with this.
Sure.
I have booked a call with you as AI Tool Report. We
Mm-hmm.
run this massive newsletter. We have the podcast. We have our accreditations. We have a team of around six. I'm coming to you and I'm like, I kind of want to automate my business in different ways, but I'm not sure how. What kind of questions would you ask me? Let's go through a live session.
For sure. So sounds like you said that you are curious about automation. Most people usually come to us with either a burning problem in their business that they think automation might be able to solve, or they're generally curious. So it sounds like you're generally curious. And on that side, what part of the business would you say you're curious on? And to give you some context, usually we're looking at things like the CRM. We're looking at things like onboarding experience. So maybe if you're onboarding new ad revenue, new advertisers, maybe it's project management for how you produce the newsletter or manage all of your advertisers, or maybe it's the invoicing process. Those are some hot areas that we usually work in.
Yeah, I mean, I would say for us, we've obviously got Kyle, who's our full-time ad salesperson. Like, he could probably do with some help from some automations to fill out those ad spots, really fill up that calendar.
Mm-hmm.
We could probably do with some help with the repurposing of social content across social platforms, reduce the workload on Cassie, our social media manager. Yeah, maybe with the newsletter itself, we could look at automating some of the research process for that as well. So
Mm-hmm.
there's probably that. And then I'd say maybe the biggest one is I spoke to you about this before. Myself, Martin, and Arturo are all ideas people. We're all big ideas people, but we're terrible at systems. So, in terms of getting an internal CRM or a system set up, that would be something that would probably benefit us massively.
Yeah, I was going to tell everyone who's listening that I have some insider information that you are on Notion anti-systems. So that's just like two huge flashing lights like, help me, help me. So there's definitely potential here. I'll give you my mini monologue on Notion. It's a fantastic tool for getting your thoughts down and being creative and open a page anywhere, create a database anywhere. Awesome. Love that for you. But as you scale out your team and you want to go find one specific thing, as you get bigger, it'll be impossible to find that. And the search might be AI enhanced, you might pay for it, but ultimately, those little pieces of information, it'd be pretty nice if you just knew where it was instead of going to the search bar every time. That's why a tool like ClickUp that has a data hierarchy that is structured provides a lot better foundation for you to scale out your business. So getting off my soapbox here, get off of Notion and get into ClickUp. That's step one. But if you don't want to do that, that's fine. Building a CRM that is reliable and accurate, whether that's in Notion or a spreadsheet or HubSpot, if you want to go more professional with it, that will be really helpful for your ad sales side of things, so that you know when their slots are, when the slots are filled, if the content, like once you know that a slot is going to be filled, you need to make sure that you have the content, it's been approved, it's been formatted, it's in the right formats as images, etc. Those things can all be tracked, and with timelines and due dates. And if they're behind on a due date, send a notification in Slack or send an email to whoever's responsible for those things. So there's a ton of that is CRM and project management there. Content repurposing is really hot right now for us. So what types of content are you guys posting across platforms? We've got the podcast, so long form video. Do we do shorts?
We do shorts, yeah, we do 2 or 3 shorts a week, and then we repurpose parts of the newsletter as well into graphics. And then, for example, Kyle, who does ad sales, is also our kind of resident AI stock advisor as well. So he'll do like stock roundups as well, which are in the newsletter too.
Cool. So talk to me about content. You said you're doing content repurposing. What does that mean to you?
So content repurposing, for example, we're recording this episode in Riverside just now. It'll automatically generate shorts for us, and then we will kind of put on some finishing touches and then put them across social platforms. Currently, from what I understand, we are repurposing through Sprout Social, which will let you publish to multiple platforms at once. But there probably could be some assistance there in getting that kind of done faster and streamlining that process and getting under one document. Same with parts of the newsletter as well. Like that's maybe more manual and how we repurpose that. So, for example, on Friday we put out a LinkedIn post that goes over the top 5 news stories of the week, and it goes in our school group too. So that can be doing with repurpose. Same with the stock analysis as well. So it's just using like what are our main methods of content, which is the newsletter and the podcast, and then reproducing them into smaller, more digestible packages, and then putting them in social platforms for people to look at and kind of using as a lead magnet to drive them either towards the podcast or the newsletter.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. So you've got a lot of original content sources. You've got your newsletter, you've got things that go to school, you've got long form, you've got shorts that come from the long form, so that's already taken care of. And ultimately, it sounds like we want some more written content to go onto platforms like X and LinkedIn more frequently, right? Drive people to the newsletter, etc. So we've just built something that takes in long form content like a podcast or like a newsletter. It does both, where you drop a video file into Google Drive. The automation will extract out these content elements, so essentially just themes and things that you've talked about. Then once you have a place to approve those, and when you approve them, it'll take you to another window. So you have a one interface for approving elements, and then another interface for the content. So it's going to write 2 different versions of a post. You can approve A or B, you can edit A or B, or you could write a new version based on those 2 inspirations in a go live box. And then once you've approved, you press approve, and it gets slotted into a content window. So you might say, I want to post at 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. I want to try to go twice a day. Great. As you just go through and edit those posts and approve them, it's going to start filling up 11, 5, 11, 5, 11, 5 throughout the week, and 2 weeks and 3 weeks. And then what we found, and what we talked to a good amount of creators, the best thing to do when you're posting is to do it by hand manually, because if you use a API to post, sometimes you'll have less reach on your posts. So I don't have any statistics to back this up. This is mostly anecdotal from other creators, but posting by hand to the platform is better anecdotally than using a third-party scheduling tool. So take that for what you will. And the last piece of this is that there's a tool called EasyGen that I am in love with right now. I think it's phenomenal. I know the founder, he's killing it. They created a compilation of models just for LinkedIn posts. This guy's got 400,000 followers on LinkedIn, so he clearly knows the game. Nice little web interface, Chrome extension, works great. You can put in images, it'll describe it and generate a post. So if you guys are making statics, it's awesome for that. We're using that for our own stuff. You can edit it and then manually post it later. So I would say I said a lot of things there, but at the end of the day, if you're creating original content through the video format, through the newsletter format, real quick on newsletter, we can enroll what's called a mail hook into your newsletter subscription. Every time you release a newsletter, the mail hook receives the newsletter, and then we chop that up with an automation. So we're taking all this original content. In summary, all the original content gets turned into elements. You approve an element, it gets turned into repurposed content, and then that repurposed content goes into a slot. If you do that enough, if you spend 1 hour on Monday going through elements, 1 hour on Tuesday editing content, and they all go into slots, you can book out a week of content pretty quickly.
I have two questions. One, we're all very busy, so how much hand holding is involved in this? If I'm just like, I want to do all these things, can you help me create them? Will you just go ahead and do them and just be like, yep, does this work for you? Bang in, perfect, you need that adjusted until we finish a final product? And two, how is your pricing structured? Is it on, I'm assuming, by that level of hand holding and the scope of the project itself?
Good question. So with something where we're doing content repurposing and writing styles, we want to make sure we match your writing style as close as we can so that you're getting to 99% of the way there, right? Like maybe you change a comma and you ship it. That's where we want to be. So we can get about 80% of the way there just with stuff that you've already put out, training the model, training the prompts, or doing the prompt engineering on our own. We would show you, hey, this is the check mark. Look at this content. Let us know what you think. You edit it, you approve, you deny some of the stuff, and then we go back, re-prompt engineer, and we should be ready for showtime. That's the goal, right? So essentially 2 check-ins, you should be ready to go. We haven't fully productized this yet. We would like to. So this is still one of our custom builds, but I would say something like this is running around $8,000 to $10,000 for the Airtable interface, the prompt engineering, the Google Drive system, or customizing if you're using Dropbox. But that's about where we're putting something like this.
Okay, the 8 to 10,000, that would just be for the content repurposing, is that correct? Okay, got you. On that note, right, I've seen from your website, you obviously work with a lot of big clients. How are the sales processes different? When you hop on a call with one of these big multinationals that's got maybe a few $100 million in the bank, how do you kind of approach that conversation, and how would you scope that out differently from, say, someone like ourselves, someone even smaller?
Well, the number one thing I learned from sales training, because that was something I had to do immediately when I left Hampton, was how on earth do you actually run a sales motion, is that I know I'm not going to do a 1-call close ever again. When I was at the beginning of this, I was trying to get people to say, yep, we're going to do it on the first run around. But no one makes decisions for a couple $1,000s that quickly, right? You need to have multiple calls. So we run it the same way, whether it's a company doing $1 million a year or hundreds of millions of dollars a year. You just got to take the first call as we're building a relationship. Sometimes that's 2, 3, 4 calls, 2, 3, 4 months. You never really know because everyone has different timelines and buyer windows. So honestly, it might sound corny to say, but like I try to keep it in the same frame of mind, like whether you're a Series B company or you are, an agency that's just getting off the ground. Try to have the same perspective and pace of the sales calls. With pricing, it's a good question. I want to say that I've been good at, doubling my rates if I know someone's got a ton of money in the bank, but you still have to have the justification there. And so I think for the most part right now, it's month 5 for us. I'm treating everyone the exact same pricing wise. And if we end up getting to the point where we've got huge companies coming in and they're all asking for the same thing, maybe we increase our rates. But honestly, like I'm getting ready to put more and more pricing on the website. So I want someone to come to us and be like, hey, this thing costs $950. This thing costs $4,000. This thing costs $10,000. Like I want that transparency because I think that's also what the consumer is expecting right now in this day and age with all the freedom of information that's available on platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter. So that's kind of the way, long answer, but that's the way I look at it, is that I want to add more transparency and then keep it flat across the board.
From all those clients, you mentioned on your website that, or the specific ones that you mentioned is that you work with agencies, law firms, and accountants.
Hmm.
Why did you pick these specific industries to, I guess, just highlight in a public domain on your website?
I noticed when I was at Hampton a pattern among digital service providers, and that there's really four parts of the business that are ripe for automation. And I'll exclude content and lead generation right now because I didn't find out about those until later. CRM for winning projects, client onboarding for launching projects, project management for fulfilling projects, and accounts receivable slash invoicing for collecting project revenue. Those four things need to exist at every single digital service business. And so when I saw that pattern emerging while I was working at Hampton, I realized that that's something that I could really sink my teeth into and drive a lot of value without needing to do as in depth of an audit. Because in my first couple months, I was asking every single question that I could think of and then trying to pare it down and see, okay, what do they need here? What do they need there? As I did more and more of these audits, I was like, okay, well, I know almost everyone has this question or this problem, and I know that I could build this automation without even asking them. It'll drive value. So as I got more into this niche, I realized that there was things that I could cut the line or make bigger strides faster for my clients that didn't require as much time of them. And just as you said, you're busy. Everyone that I work with, especially in the founder seat, so busy, right? So I want to get as little of their time as possible, especially, and we just found this out the hard way, like working with a lawyer who's billing at 450 an hour. If I get on an hour call with them, not only are they paying me my fee, but now they've just lost out on 450 of billable time, which we didn't really connect those dots until last week. So like I need to be extremely respectful, even more than I was before, of your time and everyone that we work with's time, because that hour is worth so much. So that's why seeing the patterns, jumping ahead, being able to provide value with fewer call minutes, that was kind of the catalyst for niching down. And I'll quickly caveat that by saying our new automations in a box systems that we rolled out, those are applicable to any founder. And so we're kind of opening things up a little bit by saying, hey, if you're a founder, you probably have these problems. We can help you with this clearly defined service offering. But for custom builds, we still see the ICP being professional services.
With these kind of like productized services, these service in a box, is this all in the pursuit of scalability? Because that's my only concern when I hear about your business, right? Is like when you do these one-on-one projects, these done for you automations, is like there's an upper limit to how scalable that is. So I guess
Totally.
like how do you play that balance and how are you positioning yourself for the future?
It's a good question. Scalability is definitely on my mind. But when I think about these productized services, it's much more about trust to me, because what we found is that a lot of people are interested in automation and AI, as you know, running AI tool report, right? A lot of intrigue, but it's not approachable from an application standpoint, right? You see a new AI tool, you're like, oh, I don't really have time for that. You see an automation on LinkedIn, I'm not going to go on Zapier and build that. Everyone on my team is swamped. Creating productized services allows us to get someone to, we can solve a narrowly defined problem in a scalable way. That's kind of the whole way that we're thinking about this. So without doing an audit, without taking any more time besides maybe a 30-minute sales call, I can go in and add value to your company almost overnight, because these are we just know how to build them pretty quick. 5 to 10 automations, really straightforward for us. So I can build that trust, add value in your company with automation and AI paired together seemingly overnight. And then you go, oh, wow, this is really valuable for my life as a founder. I'm going to roll this out to the rest of my company. Then we do the audit. Then we do the Notion migration to ClickUp. Then we do the first 10, we reboot the sales system. So it's a lot more about trust than anything else, because I want to make automation and AI approachable to everyone without without using a lot of your time.
And I guess like the more and more of these projects that you do, the more times you can jump on a sales call and you'd be like, oh, we've actually figured out that problem before. This is going to make figuring out this problem even easier.
Exactly.
On that note, something we've discussed throughout the podcast and before is maybe like different CRM platforms. You get Notion, you've got Asana, you get ClickUp, stuff like that. Have you noticed companies like vying towards one particular platform? Is there one platform that people use more than others? And on a second part of that question, is there something that you would recommend for businesses to use on each part of that? I'm assuming ClickUp, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I recommend ClickUp for anything project management related. I find that it's a really strong tool for structure, for scalability. We've also kind of, I don't want to say invented our own version of project management, but we have our own framework for how you should think about organizing your tasks in ClickUp to take advantage of like the progress bar feature. That alone, the progress bar feature, mini tangent, progress bar feature in ClickUp is worth ClickUp alone. Because if you can see how your work is rolling up to a higher goal, that is super valuable. So, tangent over. ClickUp is great for project management. If you're going for like a professional sales team, all that good stuff, HubSpot, I mean, I just think it's fantastic. You can do marketing, you can do sales in there. You can move information from HubSpot over to ClickUp once you're getting into more of the fulfillment side of things. So my favorite CRM for sure is HubSpot, although you could build one in ClickUp. And then if you're really looking, if you're tired of having 80 different Google Sheets for seemingly the same problem, I would say let's get you over to Airtable. Airtable really does have a nice look and feel to it. You can build an interface on top of it, make it feel like an app, but still get notifications, date recognition, things that are just things that Google Sheets just can't do right now. So I got a few recommendations there, but the big one is I would get off Notion. Notion has too many rabbit holes to go down, and I learned the hard way. Here to spread the word. I think it's a great tool at the beginning, not for scale.
I think these are great suggestions for someone that's building a business just now, still in the very early stages. But I imagine like some of these bigger organizations that you speak to are running on fucking prehistoric, ancient, like 1200 years ago systems. Like, what is that process like of trying to understand the internal team process of a company that was formed 20 years ago on some ancient system? Like, how difficult is that to overcome?
That's a great question because I've seen it, and I used to work at Boeing, and Boeing's got those prehistoric, like they're not changing their Windows Vista. Those are going to be there for the next 20 years. Um, it's interesting you mentioned it because we were actually started with the vision of let's go into private equity, get good relationships with the firms, and then they'll give us portfolio companies that they want to, reboot their internal operations. Great market for automation work. I think someone's going to crack that. I actually know a few people who are trying. But the issue that we saw is exactly what you just described. What do you do when someone is on Excel and everyone is over the age of 45, doesn't know much about the cloud, has no interest in moving off of Excel, not let alone Google Sheets, right? And we realized like that's just outside of our wheelhouse. You got to pick your battles. So most of the companies that we end up working with have a modern tech stack. They're already aware of HubSpot. They're usually deciding between HubSpot and Salesforce. They're using Google Sheets. Um, they're younger employees, frankly. So I think that was something that we realized in the PE space. We're like, I just don't think we want to die on this hill of trying to convince people that they should get off of Excel. Like I'm not here to convince you that Excel's old. I'm trying to show you the better way to run your internal ops with automation, not convincing you that the old way is just plain old, right? So had to pick our battles, and that's why we moved away from that market.
I want to get granular for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking a lot about automation. We're talking a lot about AI. We're talking about maybe AI agents potentially in the future. Would you mind kind of demarcating the difference between them and maybe explaining how your workflow actually combines those different parts and makes them work together?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can think of the automation as kind of like the train tracks. Once you lay it down, it's going to run thousands of times on the same. Yes, no. Is the character count over 100? Okay, go down left path. If it's less than 100, go down right path. Like you can put some logic in there. It's pretty conditional, but it's extremely rigid. Okay, that's an automation. So if your processes are not going to change, that's going to work every single time like a charm. Awesome. And automation with AI gives you a little bit of fluidity, freedom, because I can say, hey, does this email have a positive tone or a negative tone? Is it asking for scheduling or is it everything else, right? And if it asks for scheduling, forward it to my executive assistant. If it doesn't, leave it where it is, no problem. But that type of conditional logic cannot be done with a legacy Zap from 2 years ago. That just was not possible. So in automation with AI gives you a little bit more freedom. You could draft an email, you could draft a sales copy, you could do a lot of anything that you're using ChatGPT for. You can put that in an automation with a trigger. Great. You could. I've even set one up to say at 7 a.m. create an inspirational quote and send it to the team Slack. I had that going for a little while. So like you can do little fun things like that. Then when we get into AI agents, that's where we're getting a little bit more autonomy to say, I know what I want the outcome to be. You're going to compile a lot of different sources. Maybe you're going to go to the different source and grab the information that might not be available by API. So like, hey, go to weather is a classic example, and I'm sure there's APIs for it, but bear with me. Go to the weather page for Phoenix, Arizona at this time and tell me what the weather is going to be like in 7 days, right? So maybe there's not an API for that. So you could have an AI agent go to the website, take a screenshot of the page, interpret that the 7-day forecast on the seventh day is going to be sunny and 45 degrees Celsius and blistering hot, and report that back to the team. So it's when you get to that next level of autonomy that maybe it's that the API doesn't exist, or you just want this thing to be able to compile information from multiple different sources and models at the same time. It's almost like the structure of the automation has to be like automations have to go linear. If that path starts to curve and maybe come back to the start or something like that and iterate on itself, then maybe that's the point where an agent becomes more useful. We haven't gone super deep down that rabbit hole, frankly, because we're trying to get really, really good at automation and automation plus AI. Eventually, I'm sure that's going to enter into our product offering, but right now it's kind of like the AI agent tools are developing too quickly and they're coming out too fast. Like the quantity of unique tools is coming out too quickly for us to stay on top of it all. So we're just letting that kind of run its course, and we'll hop in when our stuff is figured out.
Based on the conversations I've been having, where I see the future lying is some combination of automation, AI, and AI agents.
Mm-hmm.
I see that eliminating a large amount of the workforce. I see a massive period of consolidation in terms of labor. I was having a conversation with my brother who works in a traditional bank, and we're kind of talking about traditional job roles and how things are changing. And I was having a long, hard think about what skill sets people should be looking at developing right now in terms of future proofing themselves. Like, if you were to re enter the job market now, you didn't have your current business, but you know what you know now, what skill sets would you look at developing immediately to future proof yourself for this developing job market?
That's a fantastic question. I think that and I'm glad I was just having this conversation with a hardcore coder, because we were having the debate of like, is your job going away? And I think the takeaway from my conversation with him is systems thinking and architecture will be the next iteration or the most important level of digital infrastructure. To say, like, if you can see the bigger picture and understand what strategies what you choose today will impact 6, 12, 18 months from now, that level of thinking is going to be much more important. So going and learning, Java and Python, I don't think that those skills will be worth a 4-year degree, but going and getting something in like systems engineering and using that skill set to translate to a business or a product or something like that, that would be a really good path, I think. Biased, I think that if I was starting out my university time again, any form of engineering gives you kind of like a badge that says I can get through something that's difficult. I think that that's just a good a good stamp of approval to get. So you can't really go wrong going into engineering. But if I had to do it again, and knowing who I am, some sort of systems engineering would probably be where I would go, because there's so many ways to sell that to a business, whether it be going into business consulting or going into product development or anything like that. Knowing what the big picture is and how all the pieces fit together, I think that's going to be a very valuable skill. Copywriting, design, there's always going to be need for someone that really understands human psychology and what kind of triggers the brain. I think AI is going to get pretty close. So do we need someone that specializes in that? Maybe not. We'll see. So I don't know. It's a tough one, man. And then also anything hard skills, anything that you're touching the product, that's going to be valuable for sure.
Interesting that you mention copywriting specifically. I did a podcast with Audrey Chia. I'm sure you've
Hmm.
seen her on LinkedIn. She's pretty massive. And we're speaking about this. She has a background in copywriting. So do I myself as well. Not writing for a company, but just writing articles on Medium. And we're having this discussion about how GPTs are getting better and better and better at copywriting, producing this end material that works with human psychology and gets you the result that you want, which is essentially some sort of CTA through to CPA, right? You want someone to click on it. That's the idea. You want someone to engage with it. And she said something really interesting, and that she feels really lucky and beneficial to have done copywriting before AI existed. Because when she comes in to see this final product that GPT's produced, she has an understanding of if that actually works, why it doesn't work. She has an understanding of the underlying architecture of copywriting as an area of focus before AI has been layered at the top. And I kind of
Hmm.
sort of agree with that as well, because I think something I'm noticing, even with people applying to jobs at AI Tool Report, or people pursuing other careers, or people pursuing stuff on LinkedIn, is like AI is still in this time period where the work that it produces is good, but it's not excellent, right? And the difference between that is that underlying skill set of understanding what it is you're actually doing.
Yep.
And I think this skills gap is developing where people are actually getting lazier with the advent of AI. You think AI would supercharge everyone, but it's actually just leading to so many university students not knowing how to do the underlying work and just
Yep.
relying on AI instead. So I think this skills gap is going to get even bigger and bigger and bigger. So I don't really know if I had a final point in that. I just think it's a really interesting era that we're in, especially with a lot of like university graduates working through this area of like AI and automation, that maybe we'll actually end up with like a less skillful workforce as a result. Um, but I don't like. Do you have any insight onto, or I guess, do you have an expectation of where the kind of future of labor lies in terms of where those jobs will be redistributed? Will we be more creative? What happens with that? Big question, but I'm just curious your thoughts.
Yeah, man, it's funny because I think you bring up a really good point that we might get a lazier workforce if everything has been done through the education system through AI. And I laugh because I remember doing like my fifth or sixth math class in college. And I can tell you with some confidence, I did not do every homework question that I was assigned to me. And I didn't because I could justify in my head, like, I'm never going to use this. I know I'm not going into this field. This is like, this information is not useful for me long term. But at least I know kind of the underlying, like my algebra, my math, my multiplication division, rock solid. And so I then think about like if you are in third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, those are formative years for foundational knowledge. And if you don't learn how to effectively multiply or how to like what a compound sentence is, if you don't get those pieces of information and you just put it into your iPad and it spits out the number, or you put it in ChatGPT, excuse me, and it spits out a paragraph, like, yeah, that's going to have some downstream consequences, you know? So I hadn't really thought about it like that because when you, like, my laziness was in differential equations, right? My laziness was not in basic multiplication. So that's that'll be an interesting outcome to see play out. And copywriting, I think the models will get better. Baseline prompting will be less important for like high quality outputs. So maybe the general skill gap gets lower, the general level of the AI gets higher. Maybe those net out, but I think that the average person will be able to produce maybe an 85% of the way there. We'll still be able to see it. We'll still be able to see the difference like we can now, and we'll still need copywriters. But I think the models will continue to get better, and a less informed person will be able to create 85, 87, 90% of the way there without trying. And it'll take someone who knows prompt engineering to get you to 100. That's the way I think about it.
It's such an interesting era because
Yeah.
AI, automation, agents, they're changing everything. They're changing the way we work, how much we achieve. Like the level of productivity that we can achieve has gone from 10 and it will be 1,000 in a couple of years' time. It's changing everything. But on the other side of that is like social facing content, we've noticed a massive shift in what people connect with, right? As like a few years ago, you would be looking for a Sam Colder video that's overly edited and looks perfect and stuff like that. And that's what was doing well on social platforms. Whereas now, if you look on like LinkedIn or YouTube, like what's performing the best is someone walking around with a pair of fucking $10 earbuds in speaking to a camera, right? And it's, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, my theory, and it's, I don't think it's an original theory at all, but it's because we are in such like an area of like overproduction and AI and like everything is so heavily produced that people are just striving for like a human connection more than anything. So like, I just want to see a normal person with fucking shitty earbuds and a $10 pre-mark shirt walking about and speaking to people. And I think that's why podcasts have continued to blow up as well and will continue to
Mm-hmm.
blow up into the future, is because people are striving for that. One thing like that brings up in my mind is like this ability for AI to provide a better work-life balance. You'd mentioned before when you were running Hampton, you were also running your own business. You had enough kind of self realization to notice that it wasn't sustainable, right? It wasn't making you happy. So I guess now with that experience in mind, kind of being recently married and stuff, like what's your approach to kind of having a good work life balance? How do you keep yourself happy?
I am pushing real hard for the next 2 to 3 years, saying no to the work-life balance that I think someone with an 8 hour a day job, 8 hours of work per day job would have, so that when I have a child, I can have the balance that I choose. And it's not going to be, hopefully, it's not 8 hours, it's six, right? Or maybe it's three in the middle of the day and four in the middle of the night. Who knows? But like, I want to have that freedom. So I'm okay burning the candle pretty hot for the next couple of years, getting ready for that. Because my whole goal, the reason I do all this, is to have a family that I can spend time with. So I work a lot of hours. I go for a run in the morning. That's my workout, and that's enough for me right now. Eat clean and get 7 hours of sleep. That's if I get my sleep, that's balance, you know. And the other
Mm-hmm.
side of it is that it's pretty easy for me to be able to say no to social engagements because I'm kind of jumping around Europe, and so my hub is in Madrid, but I've been in Italy for the last 3 months, so I don't have a ton of friends to go like hang out and do things with on a Friday night, right? It's like we're kind of isolated in the different places. We got family and everything, but at the end of the day, and I was just talking with my wife about this today, it's like I don't feel a yearning for social engagement because I don't have a ton of options around me. So it's just like in my head, all right, well that switch is off right now. When I go back to Madrid, I'm gonna be really busy with friends because I miss all of them. And when I go to New York, super busy with friends because I miss all of them. But when I'm here, it's pretty easy for me to kind of put my nose down and grind for a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we probably think about things in a very similar fashion, and that I don't see my life as being linearly balanced, as in for the time that I'm 16 to the time that I'm 55, I will work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week on a normal schedule. I go through
Nope.
periods where I'll work like a motherfucker for 6 months straight, and then I'll have a month or two off to recharge. And it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like like one of my next questions was going to be, why do you do what you do? And by the sounds of it, is very from a provider standpoint of like when you've now got away from when you have kids, it's like being able to provide from them. Is there any other motivations that we've maybe not covered so far that keeps you happy, keeps you focused, and keeps you concentrated during this period when you are doing 12, 13, 14 hour workdays?
Nope. it's all it really is like I want to have I my goal is to be able to say if I want to homeschool my child, I can have the time to do that and have my business. That is like not that that's what I'm planning on doing or like any no goals there, no goals of actually doing that or telling myself I'm going to teach my kid algebra, but like the ability to say from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. or 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. I am I am on school teacher mode. Like that is ultimate time freedom to me. And it's purely time with my child, which I think is incredible. So if I can get that, I've pretty much accomplished my mission. And obviously, I want to get back into Hampton as a member. That's a huge goal for me. but everything I do is for that future family vision that I have.
On that future family vision note, I'm very curious, what would you describe as your ideal goal, ideal life? You mentioned being able to homeschool the child there, but I was wondering if you could tie in like where you kind of see the vision of the business going as
Mm-hmm.
well, and what other aspects of your life are important to you in terms of you achieving, developing, being part of.
I would love to have the business be doing $10 million a year in revenue. I think that'd be a very attainable goal with the way that we are planning to scale out the team, the service offerings, the ramp up. Like, I think that's more than doable. I have other businesses that I have in a little file on my phone that I would love to start. Beautiful, shiny objects that I should not even entertain right now, but I'm saving them. I'm waiting. So those will be very fun. Um, like one of them is a restaurant idea that I just like can't get over. I think it'd be super fun. Anyway,
Hit me with the restaurant because I've got a coffee one idea as well. So I'd love to hear the
yeah.
restaurant quickly.
All right. I'll do mine if you do your coffee one. So in Rome, there's 4 Roman pastas that are just specifically here, and you kind of interchange one ingredient in each pasta, and it makes a different thing. I would like to have a restaurant called Quattro, spelled with a Q for the Italian version of the spelling. And there's 4 appetizers, 4 pastas, 4 second courses, 4 desserts, and that's it. And it's just like the whole thing is about 4 pastas, but we're really good at the things we make, limited menu, and in a really cool world, pasta is not expensive. But I would love to have like the restaurant literally cut in half and do fine dining on the left and like family style on the right, and like really nice wine cellar on the left, one house wine, one red, one white on the right, right? Like just totally different worlds, but almost the same exact menu. I think that would also just be like, that would make me so happy to see both sides of that, because I really appreciate fine dining and I love eating with like a huge group of people, just like scooping out pasta and throwing it on plates. Like that's the best. So that's my restaurant vision. I think that'd be sweet.
It is so fucking hilarious
Yeah.
that you mentioned that. I think that sounds amazing. I would absolutely dine there. I am a massive advocate of like a more defined menu. Give me 6 items that you do incredibly well.
Exactly.
I don't want to see pages of it. I want one menu with one page of items you do incredibly well. That's all that matters. And my idea is along the same lines. So it's a bit more crude. So this probably hails from just being brought up in Glasgow, but mine would be a coffee shop and it would be called Fuck Milk. And
Okay.
the idea behind it is you come in and you cannot get a latte, you cannot get a cappuccino, you cannot get anything with milk at all. But what we do is we have, funnily enough, 4 different grinders set up with amazing different roasts from Colombia, from Paraguay, from Brazil, maybe from Indonesia, different parts of the world. And you can come in, you can get an espresso, a long black, you can get some sort of filter, whether it's a V60 Chemex, and you can get a cold brew. And
Sweet.
the only food we would do would be one perfect croissant, and that would be it. You would not be
Yep.
able to get a chocolate one, no almonds. It'd be one perfect croissant. That would be it. And I'd have all Scottish staff so that if you come in and you ask for a cappuccino, they could tell you fuck off in the most Scottish accent of all time. So,
Hell yeah. Hell yeah, man. I love that. I'm a huge coffee guy too. So I mean I'm not brewing V60s, but I do know enough to know what, coffee culture. I freaking love it. So love that idea. I think that's sick. And I love the accent piece too, because I would love to have everyone, if this restaurant was in the US, having everyone like Italian yelling at each other in Italian and then like switching over to English real quick just to yell back something at the kitchen. Like that would make me so happy.
I don't know what it is about us or our kind of personalities that has made us dream of these ideas, but
Yeah.
we've definitely got some huge parallels there, which is crazy funny.
Yeah.
I want to bring things back and I want to finish this podcast with one question that I just love to ask people. I've asked people on podcasts before, and I ask new people this when I meet them too. And I think it's born out of the idea that people can be quite harsh and find it difficult to judge themselves fairly. So, my question for you is, what do you think people admire about you the most? friends, family, whatever, what do you think they admire about you, Grant Hushek, the most?
Luckily, I have some inspiration because I just got married, and so I had 20 of my closest buddies around me and saying nice things about me. So I think the thing that I got from them and that I could see is like an active discipline around my goal. Once the goal is set, like I moved hell and high water to be with my wife. Like it took 2 really long years to get here, to get to Europe, and then it took a long year to figure out a job. Got very fortunate to be in Hampton. That set me up really well for what came after that. And now I have a job that I can do anywhere and I'm married. The discipline that it takes to have that goal, and now it's like just focused on family. That's don't have any kids yet, but I know that's where I'm headed. I think that that is something that the people around me have noted.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
I want to finish things off just by asking you if someone wants to get in touch, if you want to find out more about what you do, who you are, where would they do that?
Yeah. So thank you for asking, and thank you for so much for having me on. This is a really fun conversation. Um, so LinkedIn, I'm the only Grant Hushek on LinkedIn. And then website is Grantbot, all one word, BOT.co. And you can always email me at human@grantbot.co.
Beautiful. Again, thank you so much for coming on. I've had such a pleasure speaking to you, and I think people will get an immense amount of value from listening to this conversation. So thank you.
Yep, I hope so. And hopefully they enjoy your coffee.